This is staph, and it is apparently a very common bacteria that can cause serious skin infection. So it's common, but why isn't everyone getting infected? I mean, I didn't even know about staph until I started training jiu-jitsu and got infected back in 2022. I mean, all this do make sense because staph is really common amongst grapplers or athletes or anyone who actually plays sports that have really high contact. So anyone who wrestles, play rugby, trains judo, and of course jiu-jitsu should know about staph or would have heard of it. But for me, before jiu-jitsu, I actually had never heard of staph before, even though apparently it's a very common bacteria that it lives on the skin of 30% of the population. So why is it not infecting everyone, turning them all into a big ball of pus? Back in 2022, in October, I had this pimple-like thing on my left arm, and little did I know that this thing will eventually turn into a monster in 3 days. I mean, it was so small that I didn't even pay attention to it. I barely noticed it and went along my day. I went to work, I went to training, and I went home. Just a very ordinary Tuesday. By Wednesday, it did go a little bit more red, but it still didn't bother me. By Thursday, it was concerning, but I still didn't go to the doctors until Saturday morning. By the time I saw the doctors, it was red, it was festering, and it was swelling up. The doctor gave me some antibiotics and said that I should be able to train. Just make sure I cover it up and I'm good to go. I woke up on a Sunday with a fever, but my arm was still red, but it didn't get any worse. And because my arm isn't getting any worse, I just thought the fever was caused by the antibiotics. I didn't think much of it and just made it through the day. And by Monday, I was horrified by how messed up my arm was. I went to see another doctor for a second opinion. I mean, look at this. It's so swelled up that it's about 20% bigger than what it's supposed to be. And when I pressed into it, I could feel this pus and some sort of fluid in there. After waiting for over an hour, I finally saw a doctor. He invited me to his room and sat me down. And that's when I unwrapped my arm. He looked at it and the first thing he said was, "Holy crap!" Just the word you want to hear from a doctor. He put on gloves right away and started examining. After the longest minute of silence, the next thing he said was chilling. What he said was, "There's nothing I could do for you here. You need to go to hospital and go to the emergency department." I mean, I knew this arm was messed up, but I was never in a state of panic until I heard these words from him. He typed some stuff on a computer and asked me some simple questions. Cleaned up my arm a little bit, dressed it up properly with a big patch, and sent me to hospital without delay. Oh, before I left, he mentioned, if my arm starts to feel numb, it's because the swelling is actually cutting off the blood circulation. If this happens, I should lift my arm up a little bit, and that should help ease the blood flow. When I got to the hospital, I waited at the emergency department for another 4 hours. While I was waiting, whenever I got to see a nurse, they always start by asking me, "What are you here for?" And as soon as they see my arm, their reaction is always something along the line of, "Oh my god, what is that?" One nurse saw my arm and even asked me if I wanted painkillers. Another nurse's reaction was, "Wow, that looks nasty." And when I finally got to see a nurse that was going to treat me, she was great. She looked at me and noticed my arm right away and was like, "Holy crap, that looks messed up." With confidence, she even guaranteed me that everything will be fine and will be better by tomorrow. She sat me down and gave me a needle to numb my arm so that I won't feel any pain when she starts cleaning out all the pus. She took out a scalpel and just cut a little hole into my arm. And without exaggeration, pus was pouring out of it. I didn't get any footage of it because another nurse was actually getting blood from my other arm. A moment later, pus stopped pouring out of my arm. So the nurse pulled out a Q-tip and pressed it against the opening. And that's when the Q-tip went right through my skin. It was so deep that the whole entire cotton tip could fit inside my arm. She continued flushing my open wound until all the pus was out. And when everything is cleaned up, she patched me up properly and inserted a cannula into my arm. And this is where they're going to start feeding me antibiotics through an IV drip. I sat there for about 30 minutes with this thing going into my arm. The nurse told me that I need to come back for another 4 more days to get my dose of antibiotics. The next day, I was actually feeling a lot better already. The swelling didn't get any worse. If anything, it actually got better. On the third day, when I came back, they inserted a cannula into my arm, but this time they didn't remove it. Instead, they taped it into my elbow. And they told me to leave it there until all my antibiotics is done. So that means I need to have this cannula in my arm for about at least 48 hours. It's one of the most uncomfortable things I've experienced. Whenever I shower or anything, it will get in the way. And then when I sleep, it was actually so uncomfortable. But of course, it's silly to complain about this because it's either this or I can amputate my arm. Anyways, after 5 days of IV antibiotics, I thought it was all over. Wrong. I had to start my tablet antibiotics all over again. The ones that didn't work at the beginning. This time I asked the pharmacist exactly how I should be taking these tablets, and I set an alarm for 6 hours every single day for the next 10 days to take the tablets. So all up, I was actually on antibiotics for over 2 weeks, and I was off the mats and didn't train for at least 3 weeks. This was tough because I wasn't actually injured and wasn't feeling unwell. It was something that was totally preventable. Something that could have been prevented if I was just a little bit more careful. And after I felt better and finished all the medicines that I was supposed to, I didn't hop on the mats right away, even if I really wanted to. The reason for that is I just didn't want to have staph spread all over the mats. And I wanted to make sure that everyone was comfortable when I come back on. Because the last thing you want to do is to come back onto the mats and have everyone feel that you might just be spreading staph all over the place. Now what happens and how can this be prevented? So staph is just a bacteria that lives on the skin of the host. So anyone can actually have it, and it's not harmful just being there. The only time when it gets dangerous is when it manages to find its way into an open wound. So if you're bleeding on a mat for whatever reason, you need to treat it right away. This just means you need to disinfect it and wrap it up right away. Don't take any chances, because a lot of the time your body can fight it off. But if you're having a bad day and your immunity is compromised, any bacteria or nasty things will actually fight its way and fester and take over. So what makes staph dangerous is not how contagious it is, but how resistant they can be to antibiotics. There are different strands of staph, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are ones that are like superbugs. They know how to adapt and know how to not be exterminated by antibiotics. So this means that some strands of staph is actually resistant to antibiotics. And when this happens, there actually isn't a lot a doctor can do, but maybe amputation. And staph is contagious, but not in the same manner as something else like the flu, or anything similar to the flu. And staph isn't particularly harmful until someone is actually careless, like me. And the best way to treat staph is actually prevention. And hygiene in this case is the biggest thing. Simple things just like cleaning your open wound properly, trim your nails so you don't cut your training partner. I mean, I cut my nails almost every second day. I don't want to cut myself and I don't want to cut anyone. If you're bleeding, stop the blood and wrap it up properly. You don't want to be bleeding all over your training partner or anyone. It's crazy because I've thought it's just common courtesy. You don't want to be bleeding all over someone. And general hygiene. Wash your hands regularly when you come off the mats. And of course, don't walk off the mats barefooted and then jumping back onto the mats. Especially if you go to the bathroom. It's not just staph that can be on the mats, it could be anything like ringworm and a bunch of other things. And of course, shower after training. Jiu-jitsu is a very close contact sport. And there's only a few other sports that is as high contact as jiu-jitsu. I don't know anyone out there who doesn't want to shower after training. And of course, if you do get staph, let people know that you're training with that you have staph. Don't be training while you're still infected. Just be considerate and let people know. Because the last thing you want to do is to give your friends staph as well. Anyways, that is it from me in this video. I hope you don't get staph and I hope nobody else gets it. But if you do and you do manage to get it, I hope this video helps. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.